Emily Rose sat on the edge of a weathered park bench, clutching a worn backpack that contained everything she owned. The crisp autumn air bit her fingers, but she didn't complain. Instead, she tore the last piece of a peanut butter sandwich in half and handed it to the man sitting beside her, a fellow homeless individual. "Here," she said softly. "You need it more than I do." The man hesitated, looking at her with tired eyes. "Emily, you barely have enough for yourself." She smiled, her green eyes shining with a quiet determination. "I'll be fine. We look out for each other, right?" This was Emily, selfless, resilient, and endlessly kind. Despite the harshness of her circumstances, at 25 years old, Emily had spent the past 5 years navigating the unforgiving streets of the city. Once she'd had a family, a home, and dreams of becoming a teacher, but a tragic car accident had stolen her parents and younger brother from her life when she was just 20. Left with nothing but a mountain of debt and a broken heart, Emily found herself slipping through the cracks of a society that seemed to forget people like her. Yet through it all, she held on to her dignity. She refused to beg, choosing instead to take on odd jobs whenever she could. Cleaning storefronts, distributing flyers, or helping other homeless individuals with their needs, she often wondered what her family would think if they could see her now. "Would they be proud of me for surviving?" she whispered to herself one night, staring up at the stars from her makeshift shelter under a bridge. Deep down, she believed they would. Across town, in a world that couldn't have been more different, Nathan Lake was the center of attention at an opulent rooftop party. The golden lights of the city stretched out before him, but Nathan hardly noticed. His focus was on the crystal glass of scotch in his hand. At just 29 years old, Nathan had everything most people could only dream of. Born into a wealthy family, he had turned a modest inheritance into a multi-million-dollar empire through a series of shrewd investments and tech ventures. His sharp mind and charisma had earned him a reputation as a promising entrepreneur. But behind the polished facade, Nathan was deeply disillusioned. He had grown up surrounded by privilege, where emotions were seen as weaknesses and relationships were mere transactions. Over time, he had adopted the same shallow values. Life to him was a game, one he always intended to win. Whether it was business deals or social challenges, Nathan thrived on the thrill of victory, even when it came at someone else's expense. The rooftop party buzzed with energy as Nathan's friends debated their latest escapades, exotic vacations, outrageous purchases, and even more outrageous bets. "What's the craziest you've ever done for a dare?" one of them asked, leaning back in his chair with a cocky grin. Nathan smirked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "I don't lose dares, so I don't bother with crazy." His best friend Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Oh, come on, Blake, you've got to have some limit." "Not really," Nathan replied, his tone bored. Ryan leaned forward, his grin mischievous. "All right then, I've got a bet for you. You marry a homeless girl within the next month. Not for charity, not for pity, just because you can." The group erupted into laughter, but Nathan's expression remained unchanged. "Make it interesting," he said coolly, leaning back in his seat. "If you do it, I'll put up $500,000 toward your next project," Ryan challenged, clearly expecting Nathan to decline. Nathan's lips curled into a slow smile. "Deal." The room fell silent for a moment before erupting into cheers and clinking glasses. For Nathan, it was just another game, a way to assert his dominance and show his friends that he was fearless. The sun hung low in the sky as Nathan strolled through the park, his sharp designer coat an odd contrast to the crumbling benches and worn paths around him. His gaze swept the area, looking for someone who fit the profile. And then he saw her, Emily sat on a weathered bench near the fountain, breaking a stale loaf of bread in half. Beside her was an older, homeless man, his hands trembling as he gratefully accepted the food. Nathan lingered in the distance, watching the scene unfold. Despite her own evident hardships, Emily smiled warmly. She spoke to the man, her voice soft but reassuring. Her demeanor intrigued him. She didn't look defeated like many others in her situation. There was a quiet dignity in her posture and a spark in her eyes that made her stand out. "This will work," Nathan murmured to himself, adjusting his watch. He approached the bench with the confidence of someone who always got what he wanted. "Excuse me," Nathan said, his voice smooth but carefully casual. Emily looked up, her guard instantly raised. She'd learned long ago to be wary of well-dressed strangers. "Yes," she replied cautiously. Nathan offered her a disarming smile. "I couldn't help but notice you helping that gentleman. That was kind of you." Emily's eyes narrowed slightly. "What do you want?" Nathan chuckled, appreciating her bluntness. "Straight to the point, I like that. Look, I have a, proposition for you." Emily tilted her head, skeptical. "What kind of proposition?" "I'm looking for someone to help me with a personal project," Nathan began, choosing his words carefully. "In exchange, I can offer you a place to stay, meals, and some financial assistance, just for a little while." Her brow furrowed. "Why me?" Nathan paused, feigning thoughtfulness. "Because you seem like someone who deserves a chance. Someone who hasn't let life's hardships take away their kindness." His words hung in the air, and for a moment, Emily didn't know how to respond. She had spent years enduring cold stares and dismissive attitudes from strangers. This man's sudden interest in her felt suspicious. "What's the catch?" she asked finally, crossing her arms. Nathan gave her a practiced smile. "No catch, just a mutually beneficial arrangement." Emily hesitated, glancing down at the loaf of bread in her lap. The idea of having a roof over her head, even temporarily, was tempting. It had been years since she'd slept anywhere but the street or a shelter, and the thought of not worrying about her next meal was overwhelming. "How do I know you're serious?" "Come with me," Nathan said, his tone encouraging but firm. "Let me show you." Emily followed Nathan out of the park, her backpack slung over one shoulder. They walked in silence until they reached the parking lot, where a sleek black car waited. Nathan opened the door for her. "After you?" Emily hesitated, her instinct screaming at her to run, but curiosity and a flicker of hope propelled her forward. She slid into the car, her heart pounding. The drive was short but surreal. The city lights blurred past the windows, and Emily found herself gripping the edge of the leather seat, feeling out of place. When they arrived at Nathan's penthouse, Emily was speechless. The high-rising building towered over the city, its sleek design a symbol of wealth and power. As they entered the lobby, Nathan greeted the doorman with a casual nod, while Emily tried to shrink into the background. Nathan led her into his apartment. A sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. The room was impeccably decorated with minimalist furniture and artwork that screamed money. Emily stood awkwardly near the entrance, clutching her backpack. "You can stay here," Nathan said, gesturing toward a guest bedroom down the hall. "No strings attached. Consider it a gesture of goodwill." Emily's eyes narrowed. "Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me." Nathan sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Let's just say I believe in giving people chances. You can think of it however you want, but the offer stands." After a long pause, Emily nodded. "Okay, but if this is some kind of game, I'll leave." Nathan's lips twitched into a smile. "Fair enough." What Emily didn't know was that she had already become part of the game. Over the next few days, Nathan began setting the stage for what he called the plan. He told Emily that she'd need to accompany him to events and present herself as his fiancée for appearances, he explained, waving off her questions. Emily, though skeptical, agreed. She couldn't deny that the opportunity to eat proper meals and sleep in a warm bed was a relief after years of hardship. Still, she felt out of place in Nathan's world. Nathan's friends, of course, were delighted by his progress. Perfect choice, Ryan said during a call. She's convincing enough for the dare, but just rough enough around the edges to make it hilarious. Nathan chuckled, though something about the comment bothered him. As days turned into weeks, Emily began to notice things that didn't add up. Nathan was kind, but there was a distance in his demeanor, as though he were keeping her at arm's length. His friend's behavior at social gatherings was even stranger, with smirks and whispered comments that made her feel like an outsider. One evening, she confronted Nathan. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked, crossing her arms. Nathan hesitated, his usual confidence faltering. "Emily, I promise you'll understand everything soon. Just trust me a little longer." Despite her reservations, Emily chose to stay. She told herself it was because she had no other options. But deep down, she wanted to believe there was more to Nathan than the polished exterior he presented. As Nathan spent more time with Emily, he found himself intrigued by her resilience and quiet strength. She wasn't like anyone he'd ever met, unpretentious, thoughtful, and deeply empathetic. And sharing a laugh, the sight struck something within him, a flicker of guilt mingled with admiration. For the first time, Nathan wondered if the game he was playing had gone too far, but the BET was still on, and he couldn't back out now, or so he thought. Emily sat in the corner of Nathan's sleek living room, her fingers nervously fidgeting with the hem of her borrowed dress. Everything about Nathan's world felt foreign, alien, even the penthouse with its marble floors and panoramic views. The endless hum of conversation at social events, the quiet efficiency of the house staff, it all reminded her just how far she was from the life she'd known. At first, she tried to keep her head down, speaking only when necessary, and avoiding eye contact with Nathan's high society acquaintances. But the isolation began to weigh on her. Every word she spoke, every step she took, seemed to invite judgment from those around her. Even the staff, though polite, seemed wary. The butler, an older gentleman named Harold, once caught her trying to clean up after herself in the kitchen and gently corrected her. "That's our job, miss," he said kindly, though his eyes betrayed curiosity. Emily's pride stung. She was grateful for the warmth and meals, but hated feeling like a guest in her own skin. Every time she caught her reflection in one of the penthouses, many mirrors, she questioned why she was there at all. For Nathan, the arrangement began as a joke, a thrill to impress his friends and satisfy his ego. But as days turned into weeks, he found himself watching Emily more closely. She had a quiet strength that fascinated him. Despite the awkwardness of her surroundings, Emily carried herself with a dignity that seemed out of place in his world of excess. She didn't demand attention or try to fit in. She simply existed as she was. Unapologetically, Nathan began to notice the small things about her, how she always thanked the staff, how she avoided wasting food, and how she often disappeared into the guest room with a notebook, where she scribbled quietly, lost in thought. One evening, he found her on the balcony, staring out at the city lights. "Penny for your thoughts," he asked. Stepping beside her, Emily glanced at him, startled, just thinking about how different this is from what I'm used to. Nathan smirked, his tone teasing. "And do you hate it?" She shook her head. "No, it's beautiful, but it's not real. Not to me, anyway. I guess I'm still figuring out where I fit." Her honesty caught him off guard. For the first time, Nathan found himself wondering if there was more to life than the polished facades and shallow games he'd spent years playing. The first time Nathan brought Emily to one of his social gatherings, the atmosphere was electric with whispers and glances. The women in their designer gowns assessed her with thinly veiled disdain, their eyes scanning her simple dress and modest demeanor. The men, on the other hand, seemed either amused or indifferent, their attention quickly shifting back to their drinks and business discussions. At one point, Ryan pulled Nathan aside, his tone ripping with mockery. "She's an interesting choice," he said, swirling his whiskey. "She's perfect," Nathan replied coolly, though his jaw tightened. Meanwhile, Emily tried her best to blend in. She stuck close to Nathan, offering polite smiles and quiet answers when spoken to. But the evening took a turn when one of the guests, a socialite named Cassandra, decided to make her discomfort known. "Oh, Emily, is it?" Cassandra said with a saccharine smile. "Nathan didn't tell us much about you. What do you do?" Emily hesitated, knowing her answer would invite judgment. I used to work a few odd jobs, cleaning, handing out flyers, that sort of thing." Cassandra raised an eyebrow, her smile widening. "How quaint. And now you're living here." "My, how things can change." The comment stung, but Emily refused to rise to the bait. She straightened her back and replied evenly, "Yes, life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it?" Nathan, overhearing the exchange, felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness. He stepped in, his voice firm. "Emily's here because I trust her more than anyone else in this room. If that's surprising, maybe it's time to rethink your assumptions." Cassandra's smile faltered, and she quickly turned away. Emily shot Nathan a grateful look, but couldn't shake the unease that lingered despite Nathan's defense. The evening left Emily feeling more out of place than ever. She confided in him later that night as they sat in the quiet of the living room. "I don't belong in this world, Nathan," she said, her voice trembling. "Every time I walk into a room, it's like I'm being measured and found lacking." Nathan leaned forward, his expression unusually serious. "You're not lacking, Emily. They just don't know how to handle someone who's real." His words surprised her, but they also gave her strength. If she was going to stay in this arrangement, she decided she wouldn't let the opinions of strangers define her, and she was going to make the most of her time by returning to every meeting she could. Nathan, meanwhile, found himself drawn deeper into Emily's world. He started asking her questions about her life, her dreams, and the experiences that shaped her. Each answer revealed a depth he hadn't expected, a resilience that stood in stark contrast to the superficiality he was used to. One afternoon, as he watched Emily sketching in her notebook, he asked, "What are you always writing in there?" Emily hesitated, then handed it to him. The pages were filled with plans, ideas for helping people like her find jobs, affordable housing, and support. "This is what I want to do someday," she said quietly. "If I ever get the chance." Nathan stared at the notebook, his chest tightening. For the first time, he felt a twinge of guilt about the BET. Emily wasn't a pawn in some game. She was a person with dreams, struggles, and a strength he couldn't ignore. As Nathan spent more time with Emily, he began to feel torn between his initial intentions and his growing respect for her. His friends, however, were quick to remind him of the stakes. "Don't lose sight of the goal." Ryan warned one night, "This is about proving a point, not falling for the ACT." But Nathan couldn't deny that something had shifted. Emily wasn't an act, she was real, and she was changing him in ways he hadn't expected. And while Emily had no idea about the bet, her instincts told her something wasn't right. "Wow, do I feel like there's more to this than you're telling me?" she asked. One evening, her eyes searching his, Nathan hesitated, his usual confidence faltering. "You'll understand eventually, Emily, just trust me." But trust, Emily knew, was a fragile thing, and Nathan was walking a fine line. The night was unusually quiet. The city's constant hum seemed muted, as if the world itself held its breath. Emily sat curled up on the plush sofa in Nathan's penthouse, a book resting on her lap. Despite the comfortable surroundings, her mind was restless. She had started to notice little things that didn't add up. Nathan's hesitations, the strange looks from his friends, and the occasional cryptic comments that seemed to mock her presence in the distance. She heard faint laughter. Curiosity got the better of her, and she stood following the sound down the hallway. The door to Nathan's private study was slightly ajar, and through the gap she could hear voices. "She's actually doing it," Ryan's unmistakable voice said, his tone dripping with amusement. "I didn't think you'd pull it off, Nathan." Nathan's response was quieter but still audible. "I told you I don't lose bets." Emily froze her hand, gripping the door frame. "And she has no idea?" another voice asked, laughing. "No," Nathan replied, his tone colder than she'd ever heard it. "She thinks I'm trying to help her out of kindness. Honestly, it's almost too easy." The words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. Her vision blurred, her heart pounding as she tried to process what she just heard. She wanted to burst into the room and demand an explanation, but her legs felt like lead. "When the month is up?" Ryan pressed. Nathan hesitated. "I don't know." He admitted things are different now. "Oh, don't tell me you're catching feelings." Ryan teased, his laughter filling the room. Nathan's response was firm. "It doesn't matter. A bet's a bat." Emily couldn't listen any longer. She turned and walked away, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The words replayed in her mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. When Nathan returned to the living room later that night, he found Emily standing by the window, her back to him. "Hey," he said, setting his phone on the table. "You're still up?" "No," she said, her voice rippling. She meant the baby, obviously. She turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "I heard you," Nathan froze. "What do you mean?" "I heard everything," Emily said, her voice trembling. "The bet, the lies, all of it." Panic flickered across Nathan's face. "Emily, I don't," she interrupted, her voice rising. "Don't try to explain it away." "Was any of it real, Nathan, or was I just some pawn in your twisted game?" Nathan took a step closer, his hands raised as if to calm her. "It started that way," he admitted, "but it's not like that anymore. I swear, Emily, things have changed." "You've changed me," Emily shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? I trusted you, Nathan. I thought you saw me as a person, not some joke." "You're not a joke," Nathan said urgently. "You're the most genuine, incredible person I've ever met. I didn't expect to feel this way, but I do. Please, Emily, you have to believe me." "How can I believe you?" she demanded, her voice breaking. "Everything you've done has been a lie, every word, every gesture. It was all for a bet." Nathan's expression crumpled. It wasn't not anymore, but Emily couldn't hear him over the roar of her own heartbreak. She stepped back, shaking her head. "I can't do this, Nathan. I can't be here, knowing that this started as a game. To you, maybe you've changed, but that doesn't erase what you've done. Do you understand how one person traffics in another's life? I'm dreading I'm dreading this moment as much as you do." Nathan's chest tightened. "Emily, please don't go." She hesitated, her eyes searching his for a flicker of the truth, but all she could see was the man who had betrayed her trust. "I thought you were different," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But I was wrong." Without another word, she grabbed her backpack and walked toward the door. Nathan followed her, his voice pleading. "Emily, wait. Let me fix this. Let me prove that I care about you." She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. "You can't fix this, Nathan. Some things can't be undone." With that, she stepped out into the night, leaving Nathan alone in the echoing silence of his penthouse. As the door clicked shut, Nathan sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands. The weight of what he'd done crashed down on him, and for the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't shrug off: regret. He thought back to all the moments he'd spent with Emily, her laughter, her honesty, her unwavering strength. She had been more than a bet to him, more than he had ever deserved, and now she was gone. Nathan stared out at the city lights, the skyline blurred by the tears he didn't bother to wipe away. For the first time, his world felt truly empty. Emily's departure marked a turning point for her, reclaiming her dignity. For Nathan, it was the beginning of an awakening, a chance to confront the man he had become and decide whether he had the courage to change. The emptiness of the penthouse was suffocating. Nathan had spent countless nights alone in his sprawling home, but this time was different. Emily's absence left a void. He replayed their last conversation in his mind, her words cutting deeper than any insult ever could. "You can't fix this, Nathan. Some things can't be undone." For days, he avoided his friends, ignoring calls and invitations. The thought of facing them made his stomach turn. They had set the bet in motion. Nathan couldn't escape the fact that he had willingly gone along with it, and now he was paying the price. Nathan's first step was to confront his reflection, both literally and figuratively. One morning, standing before the mirror in his designer bathroom, he saw not the confident, successful millionaire, but a man lost. "I've been playing games my whole life," he muttered to himself. "It's time to grow up." He started small, canceling unnecessary social events, opting instead to spend his evenings researching ways to make a difference. His financial advisor was stunned when Nathan announced he wanted to fund shelters and programs. "What's brought this on?" the advisor asked skeptically. "Perspective," Nathan replied simply. Nathan didn't stop at writing checks. He began volunteering at shelters, serving meals, and listening to the stories of people who had fallen through the cracks of society. He wanted to understand the struggles Emily had faced. Not just for her sake, but to better himself. One rainy afternoon, as he handed out blankets at a shelter, he overheard a young woman talking about a street corner where Emily had once been known to help others. "She used to sit there with her backpack and a notebook," the woman said, her tone nostalgic. "Always sharing what little she had." Nathan's heart clenched. He knew exactly which corner she meant. With renewed determination, Nathan began combing through the places Emily might have gone. He returned to the park where they first met, scanning the benches and paths for any sign of her. He asked staff at local shelters if they had seen a young woman with fiery green eyes and a quiet strength about her. Days turned into weeks, but Nathan refused to give up. The search became more than just a way to find Emily. It became a test of his resolve and his sincerity. One evening, while walking through a dimly lit alley, he came across an elderly man huddled under a threadbare blanket. The man glanced up at him, squinting. "You're the one looking for Emily, aren't you?" Nathan knelt down, his voice urgent. "You know her?" The man nodded. "She's been helping people around here for years, but she's not one to stay in one place too long." "Do you know where she is now?" The man hesitated before pointing toward a nearby church. "Try there. They let her stay sometimes." Nathan arrived at the church just as the sun was setting. The stained glass windows glowed softly, casting colorful patterns on the stone steps. Inside, the air was thick with candle wax and whispers. And then he saw her. Emily was seated near the front, her head bowed as she scribbled in her notebook. She looked tired but peaceful, her expression serene in the soft light of the candles. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. For a moment he hesitated, unsure if he had the right to disturb her. But then, as if sensing his presence, Emily looked up. Their eyes met, and a flurry of emotions passed between them. Shock hurt and something unspoken. Emily stood, her notebook clutched tightly to her chest. "What are you doing here?" "I had to find you," Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Emily, I don't," she interrupted, her tone sharp. "You don't get to just show up and—" "Please," Nathan said, stepping closer. "Let me explain." Emily crossed her arms, her posture defensive. "You've had plenty of chances to explain, Nathan. Why now?" "Because I've changed," he said earnestly. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I'm not the same man who made that stupid bet. I've spent every day since you left trying to understand what you went through, trying to be better." Emily's expression softened slightly, but her guard remained up. "Why? Because of guilt?" "Because of you," Nathan said, his voice breaking. "You showed me what it means to care about something real. You taught me that life isn't about winning, it's about meaning. And you gave my life meaning, Emily." For a long moment, Emily didn't respond. Her mind raced, torn between the pain of his betrayal and the sincerity in his words. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she said finally. Nathan nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I'll earn it, whatever it takes, for however long it takes. I'll prove to you that I'm not the man who hurt you." Emily looked down at her notebook, her fingers tracing the worn edges. Part of her wanted to believe him, to see if he could truly change. But trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. "You'll have to," she said quietly, "because this time I won't settle for anything less." Nathan exhaled, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. As Emily turned back toward the pew, he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. For the first time in his life, Nathan welcomed the challenge. After a last look, he turned back to the woman he loved and waited for her to put her hand in his. Weeks passed after their tense reunion at the church. Nathan kept his word, returning to the same corner near the church every evening. Hoping to see Emily, sometimes she was there, handing out food to others or quietly writing in her notebook. Other times she wasn't, and Nathan would leave discouraged but resolute. He didn't push her. Instead, he let his actions speak louder than words. Emily began to notice the changes in Nathan. The man who once flaunted his wealth and treated life as a game was now quietly serving meals at the church's soup kitchen. He spent hours listening to the stories of people he might have ignored before. One afternoon, as she watched him carry boxes of supplies into the shelter, Emily felt a pang of something. She couldn't quite define it, admiration mixed with disbelief. Could this really be the same man who had once turned her life into a joke? Still, her guard remained up. Nathan's transformation was remarkable, but trust was fragile, and she wasn't ready to let him back in completely. One crisp evening, Emily found herself sitting by the park fountain, the same one where she and Nathan had first met. She was lost in thought when she heard footsteps behind her. "Mind if I sit?" Nathan asked, his tone gentle. She looked up, surprised to see him. He wasn't in his usual polished suit. Instead, he wore a simple sweater and jeans, blending in with the crowd. "Suit yourself," she said with a shrug, though her tone lacked the sharpness it once held. Nathan sat down, his hands clasped together as he stared at the water. "I wanted to thank you," he began. Emily raised an eyebrow. For what? For showing me who I really was, Nathan said, his voice steady, and for giving me the chance to become someone better. She didn't respond immediately, unsure how to process his words. I've been volunteering at the shelter, Nathan continued, not because I want to impress you, but because I finally see how much I've taken for granted. You taught me that people aren't defined by their circumstances, and I needed to change the way I look at the world. Emily's heart softened, but she kept her expression neutral. That's good, Nathan. I'm glad you found a better path. I have, he said, turning to face her. But it's not enough. Not without you. Emily's breath caught as Nathan continued, his voice trembling slightly. I know I hurt you, he said, and I don't blame you for walking away. But Emily, you're the first person who's ever seen me for who I really am, not just a name or a bank account. You showed me a kindness I didn't deserve, and I fell in love with you for it. Emily's eyes widened. Nathan, let me finish, he interrupted gently. This isn't about the bet or making things right. It's about you, your strength, your kindness, the way you see the good in everyone, even when life has been so unfair to you. I don't deserve you, but I love you, Emily. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving it, if you let me. His words hung in the air, raw and unguarded. Emily looked away, her emotions swirling. She had spent so long building walls around her heart, protecting herself from disappointment and betrayal. She felt those walls begin to crack. She thought about the Nathan she had met months ago, the arrogant, self-assured millionaire who saw her as nothing more than a pawn. Then she thought about the Nathan sitting beside her now, a man humbled by his mistakes, willing to change. People don't change overnight, she said quietly. I know, Nathan replied, but I've been changing every day since I met you. Emily turned to face him, her green eyes searching his for any sign of deception. All she saw was sincerity. After what felt like an eternity, Emily spoke. You've hurt me, Nathan, she said, her voice steady, and it's going to take time for me to trust you again. But I can see that you've changed. You're not the same man who made that bet. Nathan's heart leapt, but he stayed quiet, letting her finish. I'm willing to give this a chance, she continued, her lips curving into a faint smile, but only if you're willing to keep proving to me that you mean what you say. Nathan exhaled, relief washing over him. I'll spend every day doing just that. With renewed determination, Nathan began combing through the places Emily might have gone, returning to the park where they first met. He scanned the benches and paths for any sign of her. He asked staff at local shelters if they had seen a young woman with fiery green eyes and a quiet strength about her. Do you remember the first time we met? Nathan asked, breaking the quiet. Emily chuckled softly. How could I forget? You walked up to me in that expensive coat, looking like you owned the world. Nathan grinned. I thought I did back then. Turns out I didn't know the first thing about what really matters. Emily glanced at him, her smile growing. And now? Now I know, he said, his voice soft but certain. It's you. As the evening turned to night, Emily and Nathan walked side by side through the park, their steps unhurried. Max, Nathan's dog, ran ahead, occasionally glancing back as if to make sure they were following. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt a flicker of hope, not just for Nathan, but for herself. She had spent years surviving, but maybe it was time to start living. For Nathan, the journey that had started as a bet had transformed into something far more profound, a chance at redemption, a life with meaning, and a love he never expected to find. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the newly renovated building. The sign above the entrance read, Hope Haven, a center for second chances. Inside, Emily moved from room to room, checking the setup. Beds had been neatly made, a small kitchen stocked with supplies, and the community space was ready for its first group session. The center had been her dream for as long as she could remember, and now it was a reality, a place where the homeless could find not only shelter, but guidance, resources, and hope. At the heart of this transformation stood Nathan, watching Emily with quiet admiration. His role in funding the center had been significant, but he knew the soul of the project belonged to her. After their reconciliation, Emily and Nathan had spent months working side by side to bring the center to life. Emily used her experiences to shape the programs offered: job training, mental health support, and temporary housing. Nathan, meanwhile, leveraged his connections and resources to secure funding and volunteers. Though their paths had once seemed worlds apart, they now complemented each other perfectly. Emily's compassion and resilience inspired Nathan to be more thoughtful, while Nathan's determination and strategic mind gave Emily the tools she needed to expand her vision. One day, as they worked on the final details, Nathan turned to Emily. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" he asked, his tone reflective. Emily smiled. "All the time. But it's not just about where we've been. It's about where we're going." Nathan nodded, his gaze steady. "Wherever that is, I'm just glad I get to go there with you." The opening day of the center was a celebration of hope and second chances. Dozens of people gathered, some to volunteer, others to seek the help they desperately needed. Among them were a few familiar faces, individuals Emily had met during her years on the streets. "You've done something amazing here," one man said, shaking her hand. "It wasn't just me," Emily replied, glancing at Nathan, who was helping an elderly woman. Later that evening, as the last guests left and the building quieted, Emily and Nathan stood together in the doorway, looking out at the city lights. "This place is going to change lives," Nathan said, his voice filled with pride. Emily leaned into him, her voice soft. "It already has." Their journey had been anything but conventional. What started as a reckless bet had become a story of redemption, growth, and love. Nathan's transformation was a testament to the power of change. To the power of second chances for Emily, the experience reinforced her belief that no one should be defined by their circumstances. She had always known her worth, even when others doubted her, and now she had the chance to help others discover theirs. The love they shared was built on mutual respect and understanding, a reminder that true connection isn't about wealth, status, or appearances. It's about seeing someone for who they really are and loving them anyway. As the weeks turned into months, Hope Haven became a beacon for those in need. Emily and Nathan worked tirelessly, but they also found time to enjoy the simpler things in life: morning walks, shared meals, and quiet evenings with Max at their feet. One sunny afternoon, as they stood outside the center after a long day, a group of children ran past them, laughing as they chased a stray soccer ball. Emily watched them with a smile, her hand slipping into Nathan's. "This is just the beginning," she said. Nathan squeezed her hand gently. "I wouldn't want it any other way." The story closed with a moment that encapsulated everything they had become. Nathan and Emily standing together in front of Hope Haven, surrounded by the people they had vowed to help, their faces lit with genuine smiles. A reflection of the happiness they had found, not in material wealth, but in giving back and building a life filled with meaning. In the background, the center bustled with activity, volunteers handing out meals, a group in a job training session, and laughter echoing from the children's corner. It was a scene of hope, love, and transformation, all made possible by two people who had chosen to believe in each other. As the camera panned out, capturing the vibrant energy of the center and the peaceful joy on Nathan and Emily's faces, one thing was clear. This wasn't just the end of their story, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where love, purpose, and second chances took center stage. In that moment, it became evident that true wealth isn't measured by the size of your bank account, but by the impact you leave on the world and the people you hold close. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of love, redemption, and transformation. Nathan and Emily's story reminds us that no matter where we start in life, it's our character, resilience, and kindness that truly define us. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspirational tales that celebrate the power of second chances and the beauty of authentic connection. Until next time, remember, true wealth lies in the lives we touch and the love we give.